Check. Cool. A pronoun. Wait. Pronoun he him. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. 3 framing this debate and the goals coming from the OG, we still stand in status quo because 3 things. Number 1, I think that talking about research of Indonesia, we had a lot of research like raw mineral and so on so far. Second of all, I think that every place have a good natural resource, right? The conclusion is in our country we have a lot of natural research. So at the end of the day, we have to manage this kind of natural research, how we can getting like income and so on so far, right? Second, I think that we still developing country. I think that lots of things like we have to fulfill like education, healthy, which we have to budgeting to overcome this kind of problem, like such as like poverty in every sector, for example, which is society need our help. The manifestation is number 1. I think that in terms of economy, we still unstable because there are a lot of problem we have to fix. Second of all, I think that every sector need a budget to fix like infrastructure and so on and so forth, right? Thirdly, we cannot deny that like the facilities still lack or we can manage. Like even if there are some company can handle it, but it's not enough because we have a lot of researchers, ladies and gentlemen. So that's why I think that the conclusion under our set the house, how we can like fix this kind of problem, we have to like exporting activity because when it comes to export, it means that we will getting like budget and so on and so far, right? Why I say that? Why under our set the house we say like it in status quo it's not enough because because I think that we can see like the poverty, even the post COVID-19, there are a lot of people like getting like PHK and so on and so forth, right? So so how we can fix these things? Like we can getting like income from the other sector like exporting activity and so on and so forth, ladies and gentlemen. But let's move to my argument. Number 1, why exporting activity is justified? Firstly, I think that it is expensive. We can selling for the big country, for example, which they need research. What is the manifestation? Number 1, I think that every country needs our research, as a Singapore and so on and so forth, right? They still rely with our research. Why it is important? Firstly, how we can make international relationship like if selling our research, meaning that we have a contract with them, right? So meaning I think that under our set the house we still create a check and balance with the other country, like to create a bilateral relationship with them. Like it is important because if check and balance exists, if we have a like problem. No, later. Because if we have a like problem, they can help us because we already give like a benefit for them, ladies and gentlemen. Comparatively, yourself the house, when you are banned, this exactly they will stop to make perhaps relation with you, for example, and they can find other country to getting their income. I think that it is also bad under our set the house because we still need like relation from other country, ladies and gentlemen. But while the next, I think that the relation country should be sustained under our set the house. Why? Because let's see like China help us to vaccine to Indonesia or Singapore because there are check and balance because we give them like something important to them, ladies and gentlemen. And I think the second of all, I think why it is good for the society. You cannot deny that several society works as like penambang minerals and so on and so forth, ingots and so on and so forth, right? What is the manifestation? Number 1, if we export in abroad, meaning that we can getting more income, for example. Why? Because we have different currency, for example, like dollar, for example, right? Like dollar, meaning that we can improve our economical sector for the certain worker, such as they work in the tambang, for example. They can do like exporting from other country, which they can getting like income because to begin with we have a different currency, for example, right? So what is the manifestation under our side the house? Number 1, if it is exists, meaning that it will give a chance for other worker to do like exporting and so forth, right? At the end of the day, I think they can fulfill their basic need, their family. Yeah, sure.
I think if an Indonesian ministry should only cater to the interests of Indonesians and Indonesia's development. If your issue is therefore money, I think Indonesia is also rich enough in other sectors such as agriculture so that the money is still going to eventually be fine.
Okay, even if like they still exist, but I think if we let's see if we ban this kind of thing, meaning that yeah, it's kind of hard to involve, for example, because it means like yeah, we don't have other alternative, ladies and gentlemen, right? So in your said the house, I think that managed by local government, meaning that it will take a long time, for example, because we need a more company, for example, which is not enough to handle this kind of thing. And yeah, if you always so how you can create a company? When it comes you have income, you have like relationship with other country, right? They can invest you in it. They will invest you when they see like there are opportunity to we can create in your country. And why still can it evolve? Why then economic sector can still evolve under our said the house? Number one, I think that we still like developing country, right? We need a lot. We need other things how we can to getting like income, ladies and gentlemen. In your said the house, if we rely with the company right now, I think that it's not enough because again and again we have a lot of resources, ladies and gentlemen, meaning that you have to handle all of the thing which is yeah, it will first takes a long time. For example, under our said the house, when it comes to we already like developed country, exactly we will stop it. But right now I think it's not a good time because yeah, we still developing country, ladies and gentlemen. So the conclusion under our said the house in terms of like vulnerability, we still secure because lots of people still need this kind of export and import. Very proud to OG. Thank you.
Starting my speech. Check. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. A type of nickels or a type of materials that we're banning in this case is like a raw material that has really cheap price in the international market, and also in Indonesia you have to acknowledge that we have a really limited resource. Meanwhile, this mining only keep digging it up without having how then we manage this thing to be more profitable in the future whatsoever. So therefore, in this case, the team that able to win is the team that able to provide to you that how then at the end of the day, with banning or without the banning, it will give you a sense of survivability and development for the countries, or even how then we will maintain, how then we increase the productivity, or even how then we will utilize the workers and also society in Indonesia. And we will be that team. Before that, let's take a look on what OG brought. First, they're talking about that, yeah, it takes a lot of time to force a foreign company to open up their company in Indonesia whatsoever. We acknowledge those things. Yeah, it might be true that it takes time whatsoever, but you have to acknowledge too that Indonesia is rational enough to make sure that they have the progressivity on their agreement and also relationship with another country. For example, you can see like how then Indonesia have this economical relationship with Tesla and whatsoever. Meanwhile, they are banning these things, right? So I think it's not a problem because they are still progressing on those things. And at the time that they are banning this totally, I think Indonesia is capable enough on having another partner on their business whatsoever. Another rebuttal will be integrated in my case. In my case, first I will explain to you why at the end of the day, this is the only way for us to force a foreign country or a foreign company to develop their business in Indonesia, or FDI only exists in us, so then we will have a bigger economic dependency in our side. Let's take a look on the characteristic of Indonesia. I believe that we have a lot of resource or even a lot of land that never utilized before, right? Meanwhile, what happened with this raw material and being exporting whatsoever never touch on how then this resource can be more profitable to those countries, or at the end of the day, how then we will encourage more people to work on the formal workers whatsoever. So therefore, on the development or even the market size in Indonesia will be much better in our side. So this is something that we will achieve in our side by banning these things. I believe what happened is that this because Indonesia have a lot of material. At the end of the day, this company will rely on us, right? On the exporting things, for example, how then the semiconductor or even the nickel is the only resource that is cheap enough is coming from Indonesia. So there is a huge likelihood that they will want to open their company in Indonesia, right? Or even other than that, I believe the political power of Indonesia on negotiating those things, it also exists, right? How then at the end of the day, we negotiate with Tesla on open up their company in Indonesia. So therefore, we no longer exporting the cheap material, but on how then we will have final product at the end of the day that more valuable on the bigger scale of market, right? Okay, second thing, why then it is important for us when we having these things, right? And how then we achieve the development of economic? I believe that because now they have their own standard. For example, you can see how Tesla have their own standard on when they are opening up their company. Therefore, this company will eventually help Indonesia on achieve those standards, right? Because now they have the dependency of resources whatsoever. For example, Indonesia have to be green technology on producing their raw material whatsoever. This is the momentum for us to having a transfer of technology, for example, on how then at the end of the day this company will invest more on giving Indonesia access to the technology that able to utilize the productions of mining itself whatsoever. And even the second things on the level of helping Indonesia on those things, I also believe this is the momentum for Indonesia to able to have an access and exposure to those products, right? For example, you can see like how electric car is such an expensive product whatsoever, because now we have the manufacturing in Indonesia. This is the way for us to join into the market or even getting a cheaper price for those things, right? Because now, even though Indonesia is the main exporter for these things, they are not able to achieve those benefits at the end of the day, right? This is the moment for us, we're able to utilize the product at the end of the day. Now, moving on to the next layer of analysis on how then at the end of the day it will benefit the development and competitiveness economic in Indonesia or even outside of Indonesia on international market. First, let's talk about the more that you have this company means that you will have more people coming in or even expertise coming to your company and whatsoever. That means that it's not only the source of money will be different, because now on the other side, even though that you have the relationship with other countries in order to getting the money, those relationship Indonesia will only perceive as the cheap labor country whatsoever. In our side, this is something that will be different, because now in our side, this political power coming from Indonesia to force this company to be able to achieve Indonesian workers whatsoever. On the first level, this is the way for Indonesia to have more formal workers, since Indonesia is developing countries that have the biggest interest on how then they improve the capability of workers in Indonesia. Or even in second things, by having more company in Indonesia, this is the way for us to having more taxes, for example, taxes income coming from those companies whatsoever. This will not exist in their side, because all of the taxes whatsoever only depending on small mining or even illegal mining in your side whatsoever. Or even second things, more productivity in our side, because now you have this company that utilize the product the material to a final product, means that we will shifting our position as a cheap labor country to a country that able to manufacturing new things or whatsoever. When all of this happen, it will lead this company to open a new area, right? For example, you can see a lot of area of Indonesia has never been touched before. Therefore, we have really huge inequality of economic in certain area of region. For example, in Kalimantan, how you see they are not as developed as the Jawa or whatsoever. This now, because now this company need to find a new place that is cheap enough to open their company whatsoever. It will impact this those area on how then at the end of the day we will have a new market, for example, to develop those area even better, because now they will invest more on the infrastructure of that area, right? Means that we will have more roadway in really small area of Kalimantan, for example, or more bridges whatsoever. That means on the first layer on the second layer of economic stability will be better. Or even when this company is being when this manufacturing is being bigger in Indonesia in the long term, this is the way for us to to create economic dependency, right? On how then at the end of the day, they will invest more in order to maintaining the stability of economic of Indonesia, so then their company competitiveness or even stability will not be impacted, or even, oh, this Indonesia now can raise up the price a little bit because they know that this company will do anything in order to getting the product coming from Indonesia. And a last thing is on how then the market will be much better in our side on entering the international market. Really proud to be opposed. Thank you.
I'll give myself a number in my paper, please. Okay, for my POI preference, please just stand up and then raise your hand. Please don't do it in verbal because it's going to really, yeah. And my gender pronoun preference, just call me by my speaking order. Check. Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm going to starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panels, we believe that those kind of final product from our material is only going to working the money, for example, in local market, ladies and gentlemen, and it's not going to be happen. It's not going to be really, you know, have a name. The moment, for example, you are going to export it for the international market, and I'm going to explain you why, ladies and gentlemen. But before that, let's engage to the opposition argumentation, ladies and gentlemen. We think their problem is because they think that our country is still cheap in terms of national market and in terms of, you know, our currency and so far. But we think, no, ladies and gentlemen, the moment, for example, we selling our raw material, even if our raw material, we think we still getting much profit from it, ladies and gentlemen. Because of why? Because talking about the currency gap, ladies and gentlemen. The moment, for example, you're selling our natural oil, for example, or our natural metal, for example, still we are going to getting much profit from it because you're selling in the euro, you're selling in the USD. So we think the idea of cheap is not working in our side of the house. Second, they're talking about like they're going to forcing the other country to follow our regulation. The moment, for example, we only selling our final product, but we say no, ladies and gentlemen. Because of why? Because the country that going to buying our research are developed country, right? They have power to giving tendency to create new regulation in UN forum, for example, or to propose punishment for us, for example, because they can manipulate this kind of forum, because in the very least they are very powerful. So I'm going to extend it later. And then third, they say about the people are going to our country to doing investment and buying our product. But no, ladies and gentlemen, they will doing research before they are coming. They will see that, oh, our human research are still poor and untrusted and so on and so far. So what the manifestation? There will be manipulate us anyway, ladies and gentlemen. People that going to work or the moment, for example, they create company in our country, people that going to work are most likely coming from foreign worker, ladies and gentlemen, because the company will consider that our human research is not capable enough, ladies and gentlemen. Means that we already proved to you why the cases coming from the opposition side of the house never working and they fail in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. We think We think the conclusion in our side, there is a fourth, ladies and gentlemen. My first speaker already giving much contribution, and there is a fourth conclusion for it. First, in terms of technology, we are not advanced enough. Second, it will take time and spend more budget to produce raw material until become a final product. Third, in terms of political interest and economic situation, that's still unstable in our country. But fourth, in terms of human research, that's not capable enough, right? So in my speech, I'm going to explain to you why this is not the best strategy to ban the exporting activities of raw material, ladies and gentlemen. Let's talk about the tendency that will be coming from other country. It's going to create a bilateral condition, ladies and gentlemen, with country that already been our consumer all of this time. Because of why they can propose punishment for our country, like I said before in the UN forum, because they feel they get bad impact for it. Second, they can directly cut our bilateral relation with them, and it is bad. Why? We are need other developed country to help us in our growing economic condition, ladies and gentlemen. Because considering that we are still unstable and so on so far, we need consumer from other country that have a power and have a money to buying our product. So in the end of the day, it's going to harm us anyway, ladies and gentlemen. Second, we are not. But before that, yeah.
The bilateral that exists on your side, what is the difference? Don't you think that they will be manipulative as well, because they are a developed country that have a power? Why don't it incentivize Indonesia at the end of the day?
Yeah, I'm going to explain it later. We are not the only country who have a material resource, ladies and gentlemen. Means that there is still other country that willing to selling their material in raw forms, ladies and gentlemen. So they can go to other country to buy that thing, right? What the result? We are going to lose our investor in economic sector, ladies and gentlemen. Second, there will be no more exporting activities that will be run in our country. Even if opposition side of the house, will say that no, we can selling our final product that we create by our own. Like for example, we produce car from nickel and iron and other material, for example, when we can export it, but I'm going to explain to you why it's not going to be happen. Why? Scale of the talking about the scale is only the scale of selling or exporting only in less number, ladies and gentlemen. Because talking about the trust from another country, we think our quality control is not that advanced enough in terms of technology and so on and so far. Like we already said before, right? So even if you are going to create, you are going to create it until being a final resort or a final product, for example, there will be a lot of kegagalan in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, because of the kind of thing. Talking about the quality, we think like there is already so much company that create car, ladies and gentlemen. There is like Honda, Mitsubishi, and so on and so far. So the moment, for example, you create your own car, for example, using this kind of raw material, you are not going to able anyway to export it until the international market, ladies and gentlemen, because it's really hard. And last, talking about the competition, ladies and gentlemen, yeah, we are never able to exporting our final product because the competition is really tough. The moment, for example, we are talking about the international market, ladies and gentlemen. So what the manifestation in terms of time and in terms of time and cost, in our side, the only thing that can prove to you that in terms of benefit from time and cost, only our team that can bring that. The moment, for example, we selling it or we exporting in the raw material, still we will get the benefit. Like for example, because there will be the currency gap and so on so far. And then second, why the moment, for example, you are going to create a final product is not going to be happen, because talking about the trust, quality, and also competition that will be exist in the end of the day. So with all of those kind of reason, we are really proud to propose.
Check. All right. No preferred gender pronouns, no preferred POI. I will just start my speech in 3, 2. Oh, wait a second. 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, if the main concern of the opening government team is that Indonesia as a country have way too much resources and have way too little processing power to process these resources, therefore need to rely on foreign markets, then why at the end of the day you need to sell this to foreign markets? Why not bring foreign markets into our country? Because the implication is that when foreign investment, for example, when foreign markets is already inside your country, what happens is that there's going to be an increase in job availability, for example, increase of the workers' capacity to work, for example, skills, etc., transfers of knowledge, etc. At the end of the day, will lead to the interest of the society of Indonesia being fulfilled and the survivability and sustainability of the nation itself being fulfilled way more in our case. The likelihood benefit is way more in our case than any of the case coming from both the opening or even maybe in the closing government at the end of the day. Why do you think so? First, let's understand what happens when supply stop and why at the end of the day stopping this supply of raw materials will lead to better job availability, will lead to better development of the human resources in Indonesia at the end of the day. First, what happens is that the raw materials will be stocked in one place. There will be an untapped pie in Indonesia that all of the investors all around the world wants to get in. What happens is two things. What's likely to happen is two things. First, either foreign corporations get in and establish their corporation in Indonesia, or foreign investments come and invest in already existing company in Indonesia. Both of these scenarios leads to more job availability because we need people to work on these new factories, work on these new processing plants, for example, new smelters, for example, that at the end of the day, job availability will be so much bigger on our side. But let's play into the idea that opening government team brought, that job availability will not exist because foreign companies want to bring foreign workers in Indonesia. First, this harm that they are talking about is unlikely to happen because two main reasons. First is the idea that transfer of worker is so expensive that at the end of the day, it's so much better to just hire from Indonesia because on-the-job training can be done on a much cheaper level, on much cheaper scale than just bringing people from Pakistan, for example, bringing people from China, for example. But even if, let's just say, in their world, transfer of worker is not expensive, we are now, these corporations, these investments are now in Indonesia. What happens is that we as the Indonesian government, as the ministry, for example, Ministry of Workers, for example, we can tax this corporation, we can put sanctions, we can put regulation, etc., etc. Wait a minute, this puts more urgency into why we need to put these foreign markets inside of our nations instead of bringing our products outside, because the benefits that likely to happen are so much bigger. But before that, go ahead, closing government.
Why is the assurance that international companies will have the best interests of Indo in mind when profits will eventually go to headquarters as well as the taxes will be minimized in our side of that?
Thank you. There are not going to be interests of Indonesia in the mind of these corporations. Their interest will be profit. Of course, all corporations will be interested in profit. But why at the end of the day, it's still okay at the end of the day. Let's just say, in their case, that raw materials are sold outside. They want to get profit. What happens is that these corporations want to buy it cheap and sell it on a higher level. Meanwhile, on our case, in Indonesia, we can control the taxes, we can control the sanctions, we can even control the prices to some extent. That even if, at the end of the day, these corporations will tap out. I'm not going to work in Indonesia anymore because Indonesia is too much controlling. At the end of the day, it's still better because we have the control. If you don't want to work here, other investors will just come in. So their point nullified that. Okay, going into why at the end of the day supply stop will lead to more job availability. Job availability happens because people need to man these working stations. And at the end of the day, okay, foreign workers also exist. What happens is that there's going to be a transfer of knowledge. There's going to be on-the-job training that at the end of the day will create a capacity of workers that is so much more higher in our case because the transfer of knowledge happens from these skilled workers from foreign places and these people from Indonesia that, let's just play into their arguments that they are not as skilled as these people. I mean, even though in the status quo there are so many skilled workers in Indonesia. But the transfer of knowledge will be so holistic because they are working in the same place and therefore working to achieve a common goal in maximizing the profits of these companies. Transfer of knowledge happen, increase in the capacity of the workers happen more on our side at the end of the day. Okay. But beyond that, the main idea that we are trying to propose to you is less so on stopping trade and more bringing the trade into us, because the benefits of bringing trades into us will be so much better for society in Indonesia, not only on the idea of increasing human resources, as I have already mentioned before, but also in the idea of increasing the interest of society as a whole. When the profits, let's just say the profits goes to the corporations, but we have control over these corporations. We can make them, for example, provide healthcare for their workers, for example. We can make them provide, for example, insurance for their workers. At the end of the day, the workers or even the human resources that work on these places will have so much better holistic protection even if they are working for foreign companies. So any argument that might come from closing government or opening government regarding the safety of these workers, for example, regarding the working conditions of these companies at the end of the day will not happen, because we as the Indonesian government can make sure that they will be protected, can make sure that their pay, for example, is on this standard, etc., etc. Another point that I would like to add is the survivability and the sustainability of the exploitation at the end of the day, the natural resources at the end of the day. These corporations come from foreign places that is already, for example, familiar with green technology, for example. What happens is that when they are investing in our places, they are bringing these standards of working into our places. Safer working conditions, for example, greener working conditions, for example. So what happens is that your natural resources are no longer being done by, for example, illegal miners, as my first speaker already stated. Because in the status quo, if your only interest is to get as many raw materials and sell as many raw materials outside, what happens is that illegal mining exists. What happens is that exploitation on a much dangerous, bombastic scale that will destroy your natural resources at the end of the day. Meanwhile, these companies are so profit-oriented to a point that, okay, we have to make sure that our profit is stable into, for example, 20 years in the future. They stated that it's not the interest of the Indonesia, it's the interest of their profit. They want to make profit for as long as possible, for as much as possible. So it is within their interest. This is why so many foreign companies adopt green technology in order to make it profitable for them and make it long-term for them to gain this profit at the end of the day. So what have I proven to you, ladies and gentlemen? First is the idea that if you, rather than bringing your resources outside, you bring outside interests into your nation that will lead you to control these interests at the end of the day. If you can control these interests at the end of the day, you can make sure that their existence here is fulfilling the interests of your society. First, the interest of job availability, the interest of increasing the capacity of the normal workers, and make sure that these normal workers receives proper standards of working, healthcare, insurance, etc., etc. at the end of the day. So first, our side, only our side caters to the entire idea of a ministry in a nation existing is to make sure the interest of the society is fulfilled. Only my bench took this point. Second is the idea that better working conditions, better exploitation, for lack of a better word, is the idea that at the end of the day, your natural resources will be much more survivable and sustainable in the future. With all of that points, we believe that we as the opening opposition team will win this debate. Thank you.
Before I start, my name is Elliot from Politeknik WBI. Shoutouts Angga and Hanto. But pronouns are he, him. I'll take a POIs from opening opposition ideally. With that being said, my time starts in 3, 2, 1. Members of the House, there is a symmetry existent on both sides of the House that we want two things, right? The prosperity of the global economy, while secondly advancing the interest of becoming a developed nation with developed industries. OO's case was built on the fake presumption that national development can only be achieved through seclusion of market instead of the expansion into global markets, right? So what will closing government bring? Firstly, will bring why the internal-centric growth is detrimental in the long run. Secondly, it will cause alienation of Indo in the global sphere. And thirdly, that internal development is still achieved and is better in our side of the house. So what are we going to talk about, right? Firstly is the effects of internal development-centric growth. Global trade of resources is a fundamental good when we compare with economic advantages of that each country possesses, right? A country that stands alone cannot progress. For a country to progress, it needs allies within global sphere to conduct its business, to sell its objects, and so on and so forth. In the international stage, a country's trustworthiness as a partner is signified by two things: the ability to do free trade, and secondly, the stability of policies and government within its internal sphere. When the government decided to ban export for internal development, it went against these two very principles in the very first place. Countries in trade need stability because it ensures that when they need raw resources, whether raw or ingot, it won't be fulfilled because of the government's whims to ban the exports. This will cause alienation of the Indonesian government in the global stage in several ways, right? Firstly, it puts pressure towards allies of our countries as they realize that the material stability of resources are uninsured in their side of the house. They will start, in the end, they will start to shift and buy these resources from other countries, so they will just move towards other countries to obtain their resources in the first place, right? This would be exacerbated when we take into account the recent tribunal between the WTO and Indonesia. This also creates bad press surrounding Indonesia as a country who do not want to share their resources towards countries who in the very first place has developed industries to utilize it more fully. But on the second hand, even if opposition side of infrastructure development of industry works, it will still be suboptimal. Why is this? Because during the construction of these infrastructure, other countries will continually find other countries to ally itself and to buy its resources. Meaning when we do have the final products to export, no thank you, to export, we won't have the numerous allies that we have now. Okay, yes?
On top of raw mineral and ingots, Indonesia also produces and exports several other resources, meaning we are not going to be alienated from the rest of the world. Indonesia still represents a very important agricultural partner for several countries.
Okay, I'll explain that after this. But why is it as a partner to find in the first place, right? The characteristic of the Indonesian government is that, of course, their resources are rich, as opposing opposition said, but it's because of the resources that are rich, the mineral resources that are rich. That's it. That's our main export potential in the world, right? The materials and the ingots. In comparison with when CO talks of agriculture, there's still other SEA countries who have better export potential in these areas such as agriculture, right? Thailand, Vietnam, Taiwan, they have better infrastructure in mind. They have better export potential when it comes to agriculture in the first place. This is why we're a net importer of agricultural goods, because we don't have the infrastructure to actually export these things, to actually develop it within our own country itself. But development of internal through export, why is it still better? I think there's a lot of similarities on our side of the house on the case of Saudi Arabia. Why is that? In the first place, the feasibility of developing internal resources would be hard due to the lack of political alliances, as I said earlier. But secondly, I don't see the direct link between a nation by exporting means it won't have the capability or rationale to produce self-development in the first place. Saudi Arabia is the clear example of this, right? In the early to mid-1900s, was primarily export-oriented in regards to oil resources. Then as they realized of the potentiality to produce these exports will bring towards the nationally, they became a center of global economy through international airport hubs, through international global trade, and so on and so forth, right? We think that this is more likely in our side of the house because it's logically prior, right? The cash flows that will be generated through the export will be the first fundamental step in producing of these infrastructure within the country. But what exporting would bring in the opportunity is a higher, as I said, higher cash flow by incentivizing private companies internally or internationally to set Indonesia as their basis of operation by giving these incentives. What we think that it already exists in status quo because business development is not built through banning things, but incentivizing investment through tax breaks and so on and so forth. But most importantly, I don't see the stepwise analysis of why companies internationally coming to Indonesia is a good thing in the first place. In regards of worker, we don't think there's much analysis coming from opening government on why human resources aren't enough, since it can be trained in relatively short time. But what's most important here, no thank you, is the profit incentive of international companies, when they are more likely to create offshoots of production facility rather than the headquarters itself in Indonesia, the headquarters will still be located in Singapore or other developed countries, but will just be their basis of production. And as thus, they have no incentive to keep their profits within Indonesia itself. So even if OO's case hinges on the fact that they'll bring more taxes, it'll still be less beneficial because profits will still go to headquarters. And because of that, why is that important? Because additionally, profits will not be, because it's going to headquarters, it won't be reinvested towards the local economy through support of SMEs, businesses in local areas where most of the mines are, right? So what have we brought in our case, right? We have brought, right, disregarding the time of infrastructure it will take to create these businesses, it will still be inferior in comparison with developed countries in the first place because there is no cash flow that is generated through the export, and therefore there's a lesser likelihood that we will able to hire these experts in the first place to facilitate the transfer of technologies. Secondly, it is logically prior of cash flow and is able to be achieved in our side of the house due to ability of selling raw ingots and reinvesting into the economy itself. We think that is a higher priority within the government in its entirety. So why, regardless of this, the companies won't have the best interest of Indonesia in mind, because they won't view Indonesia as their headquarters, but only as their labor pool that they can exploit, that they don't have the best interest of Indonesia in mind. With that, we are proud to propose.
Check, check. All right, assuming I'm audible. Preferred gender pronouns will be he, him, ideally taking a POI from opening for class bench engagement, but if not, sure, we'll gladly take one from closing. Right, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. I think the deadlock in the debate thus far has happened due to 2 reasons. One, a lack of clear principle analysis as to why fundamentally the decision was right or wrong in the first place. I think this debate needs to take place within the principle standpoint in which the decision becomes the main point, focal point of the discussion. This is the Ministry of ESDM, how is the rational calculus, closing opposition will solve that deadlock and break it. Secondly, I think there's been an over-reliance on foreign companies insofar as I think the entire debate's contingency of benefit is that they have to have foreign aid. I think closing opposition will also help, why even in the worst case scenario, where closing government's case applies, Indonesia will eventually have the capacity to be self-sustaining. This contribution will not only be deadlock breaking, but it will be round winning for the simple reason that we actually proved the likelihood analysis of what is Indonesia's capacity and the decision-making process of SDM. So, engagement to CG first. I think let's talk about the case about alienation, right? Three responses to break the case. One, I think no, status quo literally proves that Indonesia is still a very important trading partner insofar as just because Indonesia has stopped exporting like raw minerals, etc., does not automatically mean that all countries now wants to be enemies and declare war with Indonesia. I think that's quite a far-fetched case coming from closing government and quite lacks proper likelihood analysis if they want to run with an IR case, right? But secondly, the worst case scenario is that it reduces ESDM's impact internationally. We think that at the end of the day, this impact does not extend to the entirety of Indonesia. Insofar as Indonesia's sectors are quite varied, we have quite a strong textile, agriculture, etc., industries that all have the capacity to increase in exports insofar as internal income of Indonesia's export is still going to be fine. But if that's the case of money being pushed by both gov benches, we solve that concern. But secondly, I think at the end of the day, Indonesia's export industry is still safe insofar as international we still have presence and recognition. But thirdly, we take this trade-off at the end of the day because I think it's unstrategic to be overly dependent on other countries into our development. I think Indonesia for the past 10 or 15 years have already had the incentive to want to self-sustain insofar as we have been trying to slowly build refineries in trying to at least produce our own ingots, in trying to at least produce our own, at least process our own crude oil, raw crude oil, right? These are things that are slowly happening, but has been accelerated due to the ban and due to Menteri SDM's policy. We're going to prove why this is fundamentally beneficial. But second contribution, I think interest of the ministry itself needs to be characterized. I think this is important to properly mechanize the decision-making process. I think it's very, very simple. fundamental interest of this ministry is always to increase the capacity for production and refining of minerals, energy, resources, etc. Insofar as Indonesia has an abundance of all of these resources, we have a lot of raw resources that is yet to even be mined in the first place. And so the ministry always has the incentive to want to mine more, to always want to produce more, to then redistribute all of those resources, be it internally in Indonesia or in gov worlds outside of it. We're going to prove why that's not a strategic move in the first place. But thirdly, and the main the last two contributions coming from closing is going to finally like break this debates that long. Let's talk about in principle why the decision was necessary in the first place. Let's look at and contextualize status quo and what has happened in the first place. Indonesia, yes, has an abundance of resources, but lacks the clear capacity to actually process all of these ingots into refined materials insofar as all of our lithium has already been exported and then we import it back in the form of ready-made batteries, right? This not only happens with all of these not lithium, but also happens with things like lead, nickel, iron, steel, etc. All of the refined products comes from other countries that have much better capacity to produce than Indonesia. So therefore we buy it. What is the implication of this and why is fundamentally bad why is it fundamentally bad that needed this decision so badly? Because that means the alternative at best was only exporting. And so far than importing the products once they've been refined at a higher cost. Because exactly, refined products always cost more expensive than the raw material itself. And that is what causes the net loss of Indonesia's foreign exchange reserve, right? So it means that there was a huge opportunity cost that Indonesia could have saved insofar as if we produce our own material, if we refine these resources ourselves, we would have been able to solve all of those issues. We would have actually saved money instead of lost money. So this flips government's entire case, right? Both benches have been trying to push the idea that it is fundamentally like a loss for Indonesia because we eventually because we stop exporting and we stop gaining money. This proves that actually we save money by producing the resources itself, by instead not having to buy all of those expensive already refined materials coming from other country, right? So the decision, therefore, becomes more justified because there is a clear urgency to be self-sustaining. What is the weighing of this principle? Opening has a practical deadlock. We eventually prove why the decision had to be made in the first place. This automatically weighs us over both opening benches. Let's talk about the development of Indonesia. This is also going to finalize CG's case. I think even if Indonesia in the worst case does get alienated, as closing government said, it's still going to be safe, and here's why. Because nowadays, there is already an incentive for Indonesia's abundant raw material to be used for ourselves, right? The principle of a government policy is always long-term. Insofar as no government policy will only work in the short term, the incentive is always to help the long-term future for Indonesia to be self-sustaining, right? This is exclusive to the ban because exactly the production of these materials still happen. So any option, the only option remaining is to invest in more refineries, in better quality refineries and factories and production to be able to produce it to the same or almost the same capacity as these foreign countries that we usually import from, right? What is the impact? Becoming more self-sustaining means that this is separate from opening opposition's extension that is still reliant on other and foreign companies. So we are the only team that truly engages to both gov benches pushes, even if foreign companies, for example, no longer want to do business with Indonesia. We prove why Indonesia still has A, the incentive, and B, the capacity to then help ourselves out, right? What is the likelihood? A, this is already within the Indonesian interest, but B, the experts that closing government posit still want money, so I think it's still very much possible for them to come here. It's going to be sustainable at the end of the day. Sure, it's initially expensive, but it's a worthy trade-off to take. We take this benefit. Very, very proud to close and oppose.
Am I audible? Okay, before I start, I would shout out to Hanto and Angga as my mentor. I'm so grateful to be able to compete in this competition as far. And I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Members of the House, we have been debating around the energy and resources topic about this House regrets the decision to ban exporting activities of raw minerals by the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources. As far as we know, the characterization that has been made by the opening and closing benches are Indonesia that has an abundance of mineral resources and ingots industry, but they don't have the capacity to process it yet. And we also do not forget that there has been an establishment of these facilities to mine these mineral resources and ingots industry available in this country. Let's talk about my second. These companies are banned by the ministry to export their products because it is unrenewable energy inside the country. Therefore, it must be conserved for the development of only inside the country. This is harmful for the company because there is no guarantee that the products that they have will be sold inside the country, and the infrastructure and investment already made will become likely useless. Therefore, the harms will affect directly into the local companies that have these establishments, right? So this may lead into company bankruptcy. Workers become jobless because lack of income, and etc. But the opposition tried to say is that it's not likely because Indonesia will be invested by private companies to build the facility inside the country. What are their incentives from the first place to build inside the country? Because as far as we know, how to establish a company itself, a private company, I mean, inside this country is already hard. There's so much bureaucracy happening, especially in the far part of the country, such as Kalimantan or Papua, that has these resources, but lack of accessibility to really establish these companies, right? So the political instability also affects this, especially in such sad area. And also, labor absorption won't be happening because labor force of the local area doesn't qualify, etc. But they tried to say that the transfer of knowledge inside the company, the private company that made into the Indonesia, will be the knowledge will be transferred into the local labor. But by due trainings, that means more experts must be invested, more people must be invested into the country. Therefore, it is increasing their cost, and it is not likely because as far as we know, because like I said, the private companies such as Tesla that has the capacity to produce such processed products already has such technologies like AI and advanced technology that requires them to do jobs, and therefore the transfer of knowledge of this company, the incentive to do it, it is not likely because they won't do it anyways, because the availability of AI already exists inside the private companies such as Tesla. Okay, but what we want to bring here is the development of country still exists within both sides of the house, but it is better inside our house because development still exists. The private companies, the private actors of the Indonesia, like local companies, will reinvest their exports into its own company to finally produce such processed products. So it is inside it is inside of their incentive to actually develop their own technologies by using the earned money from the exports into developing such materials into processed products that has higher value than raw materials itself. Therefore, I think,
Point zero.
okay.
I think at the end of the day, being self-sustaining is still a benefit, and your case is still entirely contingent on foreign companies continuously developing Indonesia. Why is that likely on your side, and why is our case not likely?
No, have I said before that the local companies that has been established inside the companies will try to develop its raw products into processed products by using the money that they gain from exports. By banning this means that their lack of income will hinder the development progress of these local companies. Therefore, the dependency created by, like I said, by inviting private companies from outside still not beneficial for the development of the country itself. What have we brought in this debate is first the harms and benefits that we want to bring is more likely happen, or the benefits more likely happen inside our side, because the local companies will likely to flourish and to use that monetary gain to able to develop processed products and finally achieve economic independency inside the country. Therefore, we are proud to propose. Thank you.
Okay, am I audible? Oh, okay. Okay, yeah, prefer PRMS is just, stand up and raise your hand, and yeah. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay, first off, let's talk about CG's case. So, their entire case surrounds that, so country needs alliances in the international world. So by banning, exporting, it's going to make Indonesia felt like it's alienated or something. So I think this is not really the case because, when we ban the export of minerals, it's actually going to benefit us. How does this work? So it looks like so we know that Indonesia still lacks in how to produce these raw materials into actual products, to actual refined products. And we're still lacking in that. And so how does it look like? So basically we sell these raw materials like, raw gold ingot, for example, for foreign countries for a cheaper price. And then foreign countries will turn these raw gold ingots, they will turn these raw materials into actual refined products. And then they will sell them back to us with a much higher price. And then, yeah, I think that's, I think it's already within the Indonesian government to have that incentive that we want to keep getting profit. And if we keep doing that, if we keep the same pattern of selling raw materials and then buying back a refined product with much higher price, it's eventually going to, it's going to limit our profit. And eventually we're losing that income. And so, yeah, I think that's why we should keep in mind that there's existence of other factors besides minerals, as a source of income through sectors such as agricultural. And then they talk about that, deeper than about, from CG about, okay, there's other CA countries with better agricultural resources. I think we've answered this burden by, engagement by my first speaker, because we already have the capacity and the safety and the acknowledgement by other countries in several sectors. So just because there's other countries with better agricultural resources, let's say maybe, a certain CA country, they make better rice exports. We're also saying, pretty much strong in exporting tobacco, for example. We can make more tobacco, and by actually producing these tobaccos into cigarettes, we can then export it. And so if we keep doing that, we're actually going to further develop our country by getting more and more profit by that, already refined resources that we can already take care of. And then we can also push and, pushes and supports the self-sustainability that we want, that the Indonesian government trying to achieve. And then the worst case scenario about if we get alienated by other countries, I think there's always a long-term contract and long-term benefit and businesses with other countries. So they won't always going to further, just ditch us all together if we, did not comply to them by not exporting raw minerals, for example. I think that there's going, we're also acknowledged by other countries, by other sectors as well. And worst case scenario has been answered by us. So we're not, we're not going to be alienated because, our presence is still pretty much strong and we are still pretty much recognized in the international world. And their case also talks about, local companies will flourish under,
POI.
by not, I'll take POI.
When we produce for international demand. What's the likelihood that this production won't absolutely wreck prices within our own country due to oversupply?
Okay, I think that no, oversupply is not really, it's just a mere worst case scenario. Because I think that by actually oversupplying that, when we focus on, producing resources that we can already produce in itself, we can actually, make more, we can actually produce more of that products that we can already make. It's like, for example, maybe if you say that, okay, we might get, oversupply with tobacco, I think we can actually, there's always going to be demand for cigarettes, there's also going to be demand for certain products. So I think no, oversupply is not going to happen on our side because we're already going to sell all of that, other refined products that we can actually focus on instead of, raw minerals. Okay, and then, so let's talk about OG. So I think their case resolves around the fact that, okay, so our country still faces many issues in other sectors such as, maybe economical problems such as poverty, etc. And that we're still a developing country. So we have many issues to take care of. And so they said that we should still support export because there's going to be contract and international relations that we still need help from other countries. Here we say that we do still need exports, but keep in mind there's other factors that we can, or other sectors that we can delve into, like the agricultural system. And I think that the POI from my first speaker hasn't been answered by their side. So I think that exports and international trade will still going to happen on our side, but in other sectors like agriculture, like what I've explained before, like maybe producing more tobacco, we can make more cigarettes. And so by that amount of cigarettes, we can make money from that, we can gain more income, and then we can also further our self-sustainability, besides raw minerals. And so I think their case about there's foreign countries that are powerful enough to quote-unquote manipulate us, I think this is just a worst-case scenario. Sure, all countries, they want profit for sure, but I think that Indonesia is not prone to be manipulated by other countries, because I think that before we make agreements or making international agreements and trade with other countries, there's always going to be, some sort of a discussion whether this is going to benefit us or no. So I think that the Indonesian government have the incentive to further the whether if we're going to gain more profit or no. So I think that the punishment OG is trying to propose to us is too unrealistic and not as bad as OG thinks. So I think that we're still going to do exports and bilateral relations through our other factors as well, besides minerals, because we have other abundant resources that we can sort into. Okay, and then lastly, let's talk about OO. So their case, they talk about, okay, by making resources cheaper is going to increase the standards of producing raw materials, then by that we can get support from foreign countries to help us. I think that this is already a burden that Vinay has already brought to you, that we are still too contingent to foreign countries. I think this is not as easy as that. I think countries sure they want to be, gain more income as much as possible and to gain profit, and it's not as easy as, oh, we can get them, we can give them cheap materials and then increase the standards and get help from these foreign countries, and by bringing these foreign market onto our country. I think that is not as easy as that, because if we have more foreign countries, they're inside our country, it's going to actually, in the long run, they're going to take advantage over us. So do you really want foreign countries to, to take, all over our like local factories and so on. And so I think that the local business and so on. Okay, so I think that the Indo government has the incentive to maintain and develop our own country, so to further develop our self-sustainability. So I think the Indonesian government, they won't actually focus us on being contingent to foreign countries and their market as well. So yeah, I think that's all for me, and proud to oppose.